Welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. The Pharmacy Leaders Podcast is a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network, with interviews and advice on building your professional network, brand, and a purposeful second income from students, residents, and innovative professionals.
All right, welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast. I'm welcoming back the Pharmacy Girl from thepharmacygirl.com, personal and professional development. She has a landing site for women seeking fellowship, professional development, and a discussion related to being a woman in pharmacy. We had an interview before and quite a few downloads, and it became clear that this was a topic that people wanted to hear more about. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through 5 of her most recent blog posts and talk a little bit about goals as we start thinking about it for the new year. But Jackie Boyle, welcome to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast.
Hi, Tony. Thanks so much for having me back. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, let's just first start with someone that we both know, Christina Tarantola. And I know her and Adam Martin from the Pharmacy Podcast Network. But what we want to do is kind of go through each of these blogs and kind of talk a little bit about each of them, maybe give a little bit of a summary, and then what we can learn from them. So we can get a better idea of what it is to be working as a woman entrepreneur. So let's go ahead and maybe give a little summary of Christina Tarantola's journey.
Sure. So I actually had the privilege of meeting Christina when we were both speakers at a career development talk in Indianapolis. So it was kind of interesting. She's from Pittsburgh. I'm from Cleveland. We meet each other in Indiana.
Oh, no, I'm from Baltimore. This is the worst football mix you could possibly pick.
Hey, now. Hey. All right, I won't even go with the Browns. I can't. That's a whole nother topic. But anyway, I heard her story. We each spoke for 5 minutes, but I was so intrigued by what she was doing that I had to connect further with her. So she actually has an entrepreneurship model that incorporates nutrition in helping people who are trying to take control of their healthcare. So she realized during pharmacy school that while we receive a little bit of training about how to help patients with their lifestyles, she didn't feel like there was adequate training because, as we all know, most chronic disease states are caused by, lifestyle issues. So she wanted to help solve a problem and fill in a solution of entrepreneurship where she really is a coach for her patients that helps them take better control of their healthcare and maybe even get off of some of those prescription medications that they're taking.
I've heard her and Adam talk, and they seem to have a good connection in that they both care about nutrition and things like that. And maybe a little bit opposite from my wife and I, which have 2 completely disparate entrepreneurial journeys. I've got the book in Top 200, and then she's got skincare with Rodan and Fields. What about your own entrepreneurial journey? How do you work on your part, and then does your partner have his own, or is it just it's you?
Yeah, so far it's me. I think he thinks I'm a little crazy at times, but he's definitely supportive. So he helps me, send things out in the mail or gives me some downtime to be able to work on things. But I'm much of a morning person, so I usually get all my entrepreneurial stuff done in the very early morning hours before work or on the weekends. Him and my daughter sleep in a little bit later, so maybe 9 or 10 o'clock they're sleeping in, and I'm up at 5 or 6. So that's my sweet spot, is those morning hours. And so far he hasn't ventured into entrepreneurship, though he has crafted a few things for the holidays that I'm like, we should really be thinking about Etsy with these. Although he's just doing it for the family right now, I think he might have a little bit of craftiness in him that we can capitalize on.
Okay, that's awesome. Can you tell me maybe a little bit about how you established that time? After 10 years, my wife and I have been married 10 years, and we do an interview on the Pharmacy Podcast Network where I ask her about her entrepreneurship, and she comes out with this, that 45 minutes after I get home where I'm, feeding the kids, that's really just a time suck for me, and it's just really brutal. And I didn't really know, I don't want to know if I knew about it or I didn't maybe understand the impact of it. So since then, I now take the kids after school on Wednesdays and Fridays for sure, so that she has those 2 afternoons to do entrepreneurial stuff, meet with her friends, or go work out. I think there's kind of this fiction that, okay, he drops them off 5 days and then I pick them up 5 days, that somehow that makes it 50-50, when it'll never be 50-50. And guys are more proud of their 5% than you guys are of your 95%. So can you tell me how you guys came to that? Okay, well, this is the time I really need. How did you have that conversation?
Yeah, I think that's, like you mentioned, that's the first thing that needs to happen is a conversation, and finding out what each other's needs are. And I know, Tony, we were talking a little bit about the 5 love languages. Mine are, what is it called? The acts of service. And
Same with
so
my
anytime
wife.
my husband does anything like cleans the kitchen, it's the best thing since sliced bread, really. So once we identified what we need, and for me, it's any time that I can capitalize on being productive or doing something, or him being productive and doing something, that's when I really love him even more. Not that I don't at any other time. It's just those acts of service are really great for me. And then I had to identify from his standpoint, what does he need? He needs quality time. So, with that alone time in the morning when I'm not missing out on family time because they're both sleeping, I'm still able to get my priorities taken care of. And then we have time at night that we spend together as a family, because I know that that's really important to both of us, but more so I could see that that's what his needs really are.
Okay, good. That kind of gets us into our next blog post where Michelle, is it Louise Vardy?
Yes.
And empowering female entrepreneurs. Tell me a little bit about what she did and what she does uniquely to empower female entrepreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely. So she has a great Facebook group that is all about women entrepreneurs. She's actually in the United Kingdom, and I've never met her personally. I connected with her on a women's entrepreneur Facebook group, and I asked her if she wanted to blog for me, because she just seems so motivational and doesn't have a specific business niche, but really helps coach women who are entrepreneurs to make sure they can fit it all in and feel good about what it is that they're doing in the entrepreneurial space. Sometimes, we as women have guilt associated with giving our time to certain things. So she motivates people to believe in themselves, pick a situation and an entrepreneurial venture that fits for you and your lifestyle. And then once you pick something, be consistent with it.
Can you explain me time? Because as a guy, that's not a word that we use. It's what I just say, okay, well, I'm going to go to the bar to sit down and type out these recommendations. And I was drinking soda, not beer, just so I had an hour before we went to church and kind of started all over again. But that term was not familiar to me. I don't really understand that term. And I did look it up, and it said that the average mom gets 14 minutes a day.
That sounds about right. Maybe a few more minutes on other days, more than some, but it could be that instinctually, our instincts want us to nurture. So I know, Tony, we talked about both being obligers, and I know you and your wife are. I'm guessing me and my husband are as well, but we're constantly giving of ourselves to others. And perhaps that goes along with our profession, right? We're pharmacists. We want to help other people. But if we don't remind ourselves that we also need a little bit of time for self-care, then that 14 minutes can quickly become 4, and that's not a good thing. So I love, and I'm going to go back to midyear for a second, because I loved Michelle Obama's recommendation of actually putting yourself on your calendar first. So you open up 2018 calendar, book out your vacations, book out the time you're going to go to the gym, actually put your hair appointments on your calendar so that you actually have some me time that's more than 14 minutes available throughout the year.
That's good. I think that, and I'm probably going to sound like a broken record, but we don't even use the word record anymore, but you talked about daily reminders, and this was your blog post, right? A
Yes.
daily reminder.
Yeah.
So a little bit about, kind of what we take for granted and how we take for granted maybe that we have so much time. But I got to tell you, I feel like I just had my kids and they're almost 7 now. Like what just happened? Like I was just, I was just in the NICU with them, and all of a sudden, I'm taking them to first grade, and they're going ice skating and doing all of these things. Can you talk about maybe how we can slow down a little bit as we get to the new year and this kind of a turning point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes it takes a great conversation to remind you of what our circumstances are, and that some of the things that we might complain about, other people are either praying for or wishing for that they could have in their life. I mean, as pharmacists, we have really great jobs, right? We have great income, we have great opportunities to help others. And sometimes I think those things can fall by the wayside. So, just a little bit of mindfulness, looking around and thanking someone for what they've done for you, or maybe paying it forward and buying the person behind you their Starbucks drink for the day. It's some of those little things that I think can help us realize, wow, I'm grateful that I'm able to do these things every day as a result of where I've gone in my life and my upbringing.
Okay. So let's go to the visualization blog post. And I feel like I went to go see Star Wars, so I'm thinking, Luke Skywalker on the mountain doing the kind of yoga pose and, visualizing and that kind of thing. But I don't think that's exactly what you're talking about. Can you talk about visualization as part of your goals? I know we talk about SMART goals where they have to have certain attributes, but how can we visualize what we want and kind of stay on track?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give an example of this because I think it is kind of a very abstract concept to grasp. But let's say you have a uncomfortable feeling when you think about public speaking. Well, if you remove your own discomfort with that situation, it really isn't a stressful situation, right? It's just people gathered in a room. One person's talking, the other ones are listening, but it shouldn't necessarily be stressful. So in order to prepare for a situation like that, I've been reading a lot about how you should visualize what that situation would look like if it was an ideal setting. So if you were calm, if you were collected, if you weren't nervous at all, if you didn't stumble upon any of your words, all the things we think about when it comes to public speaking, what would that actually look like? And as you're preparing for that next time that you're in front of a group of individuals, really visualizing and taking time to notice how you would feel in that situation. Your heart rate would be lower, your breathing would be slower, your words would be articulate. And even thinking about those things has shown that it actually helps you perform better. So it's really fascinating to me, this concept, because I've tried putting into practice a few times recently, and it actually works. So I want to help people understand that they can really do anything that they set their mind to. And by process, it may even become more achievable.
Tell me a little bit about the vision board, because that was something that was a tangible thing I could do. So I guess let's say, okay, we'll visualize the goal and so forth. But that's kind of a thing that I could do maybe with my kids, or because a lot of times if there's something that I can do and my kids can be involved, then it's something that I can actually probably get done. So tell me a little bit about a vision board.
Yeah, so a vision board would just be a collection of photos of your goals. So whether that's a trip that you want to take, or maybe it is a public speech that you want to give, or a job that you're pursuing, anything that can be a visual reminder of where you're going with your goals. So let's say, I don't know, one of your kids wants to be a firefighter. Just having a picture of that might get your children to start thinking about being that vision someday and working towards that goal. So it's something you can put by your desk or your workspace, and there's really no one right way to do it, but it's just a visual representation of where you want to go with your goals.
Okay. And let's go to, I think, which is I don't want to say the toughest one. I think it's both the easiest one and the toughest one. It's the stretch goal. And
yes.
That's when we're getting to something where, well, actually, if you can maybe define stretch goal first, and then we'll kind of go through. I want to take the time to go through each of these 5 points that you put in, because a stretch goal is kind of what people really, really want, but usually the biggest obstacle is themselves, where they just say, oh, there's no way that could be me.
Yes, absolutely. So a stretch goal should be something that puts you a little bit or maybe a lot outside of where you are comfortable. So identifying either a job or a pursuit that you're seeking that really at this point you may say, I don't know if I can get there. That's how you know that it's a stretch goal. So it's something that doesn't seem readily achievable right now, but with a little bit of work and a little bit of talking through some of the fears of achieving that goal, you may be able to get there.
So let's go through these 5 pieces. The first is that mental and physical preparation.
Yeah. So preparing through the process of setting a stretch goal, you really have to remain positive throughout this whole journey. So I don't know if you've ever read The Confidence Code, Tony.
I have not.
It's a great read, especially for women, I think, because there is some literature out there to show that women will actually wait until they're 100% qualified for a job to apply to it, whereas men sometimes will be 60 or 80% qualified.
It's much lower.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think this is a kind of an overall challenge to women is to apply for that job that you're not 100% qualified for and just try it out. You never know what will happen. But mentally and then physically, it could be visualizing, as we mentioned before, visualizing the process of what it would look like if you had that great interview or if you had that great public speaking event. So getting your mindset in the positive way and then carrying out maybe some visual or even practical practice runs of what you're going to do. I know sometimes before I public speak, I'll go into the room and just stand where I'm going to be speaking and practice my speech so that I get that out of the way. I have that mental block kind of out of there because I know that can be intimidating sometimes.
Yeah, and to speak to that whole ignorance is bliss, I think for many of us, we'll just apply for something having no idea if we're qualified or not. And I applied for a faculty position at School of Pharmacy completely. There was no way I was going to get it, but I had no idea. And so I just went in and, applied for it and then ended up teaching years later in a bit of a different role. But I think you're absolutely right. It's not as much preparation, but just even, going up to the rostrum, going to the room, knowing where the room is. It just takes kind of some of those pieces away. Like, am I going to be able to find it in time? Am I going to be able to get there in time? Mm-hmm. So going through the motions a little bit. Now, the next one was one that was really one that I feel like it takes a little time to figure out exactly what that purpose is. But once the purpose is there, that's really kind of the fire and the fuel that keeps things going. But talk a little bit about ensuring your goal has a purpose.
Yeah, sure. So you may, when you start thinking about these stretch goals, you may find that you have, 10 that are looking really attractive or may sound really flashy when you tell other people about them. But at the end of the day, try to think about how this is actually going to line up with either short-term or long-term career goals, because you could maybe end up pursue something that doesn't really help you progress or takes you down a totally different path that you didn't anticipate. So I agree, Tony. This one is probably going to require the most time and reflection to make sure that once you commit to this stretch goal, that it's something that's going to serve you either personally or professionally.
Yeah, and when we're talking about social media and things like that, often some people get it a little bit wrong and end up doing advertising or keep asking like, well, why aren't people following me? Why aren't people engaging with me? And it really comes down to value. If you consistently kind of go back and like, okay, well, am I in the spirit of providing value for them, or do I just want them to buy what I have, follow me, whatever it is, and then just kind of sticking with that value so that really, if it comes from the right place, and it's going to be successful. But then comes the next point, which is to ignore the skeptics, because there's a thumbs down button on YouTube and there's a thumbs up button. And, you know, I'll see something that has like 1 million thumbs ups and there's maybe 1,000 thumbs downs. And it's so hard not to think, wow, 1,000 thumbs down. And you're like, no, but there's 1 million thumbs up. So tell me a little bit about the skeptics and getting past that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, once you set this goal, there is some evidence to say as well as if you tell someone about it, then you actually are more likely to achieve it. So if you get a goal that you're really excited about, you might share it with others, and you may have some individuals that say, that's kind of crazy, or that's way too out there, or that's really not a good idea. And you have to find a way to kind of tune that out if you really want to achieve this goal, because what can happen is those 1,000 thumbs downs can stick with you, and then you might not progress towards the goal like you would have if you just kept on that positive mindset. So I know it's going to be difficult to tune out some of the negative talk that you might receive, but our minds are a powerful thing. So if you let certain things get to you, then your goal might be hindered a little bit.
And when we're talking about this, a lot of times the people that are the skeptics are the ones that are actually trying to protect you, and they're trying to protect you from being hurt. So tell me how we can find that support system. And some of the people that are the skeptics might be those that are closest to us, and that might make it a little bit tough. So how do we get this support system?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because it could be that our mentors are the ones that are saying, I don't know about this. But it might be having a conversation with them to reiterate the purpose of why you're pursuing this and why it's going to help you in either your personal or professional life, or maybe even both. So at times, while the ones that are close to you might be the ones who are saying, I don't know, if you have a good conversation about your own purpose and how you've come to this conclusion, you never know, you might change their mind.
And then I heard this is true or not true, Cortez burning his ships, but that's kind of the visual we hear when you say consider not having a backup plan. Tell me a little bit about why you would recommend not having a backup plan.
Yeah, so this one is a maybe you do it, maybe you don't do it step, because if it's a really risky decision, you might consider having a backup plan if you don't achieve that goal for some reason. So, for example, if you're pursuing a new job, I would recommend, not taking it until you're sure that you have it, so that you're not quitting your first job until you achieve, securing the second one. If it's a low risk goal, like maybe it's getting to the gym 5 days a week, well, you don't really need a backup plan. You just need to identify what barriers might get in the way that prevents you from achieving that goal. So this would be a great time to discuss with your mentors what type of risk is associated, especially if it's career related. But I would say when it comes to personal goals, for the most part, those are pretty safe, because you're working with just yourself, and pharmacy being a small world, those are a little bit riskier when it comes to career decisions.
A number of people are finishing up their residency applications and things like that. And then there's going to be a very long waiting period. What do you recommend they do? Because the numbers are about 50-50 that you're going to get one, depending on the way you look at it. It could be a third of them get a residency versus half, but there are going to be people that don't get them. But I don't think there's anyone that's applying that is really thinking, okay, well, I'm not going to get one. So what is a backup plan that's kind of respectful of the process, but also not saying I'll never get one?
Oh gosh, I think since the match has changed a little bit with the second phase of the match now, that's really helpful because even if you don't match in round one, now you have round two, which you're still able to rank programs. The programs can rank you. So there's more leverage in that scenario. But really trust the process of the match. This sounds very cliche, but I really think everything works out for a reason, including the residency match. So even if, for some reason you go through both phases and the scramble and don't get a residency, you can still apply next year, and actually the candidates who come in with 1 year of experience are usually very competitive because they've been working with patients and healthcare professionals for an entire year compared to a student who might not have had that experience yet. So I would say if you're dedicated to the residency pursuit, you will get one, and just keep pursuing that goal if that's in your career development plan.
All right. Well, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would want to tell someone for the new year that could help them maybe with their goals or their entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, sure. So I would think about planning out the entire year, set some year-long goals for yourself and then work backwards, maybe every 3 months to set some milestones that you can achieve for yourself. And this is a great time of year before, we have this week before the holidays get crazy to just sit down with your new planner and say, all right, what do I want to achieve in 2018, both in my personal life, maybe my professional life and my entrepreneurial life, if those intermix, and get something on paper and tell someone about it because you're more likely to achieve it if those two things are done.
And let's just go over those books that we talked about. If somebody does want to kind of maybe listen to them or read them. I don't read. I always listen to audiobooks. But we talked about the 5 love languages, and there's like a number of different ones. This is like, which one's the adult one? Or is it just like the original one?
I think it's 5 love languages. I know it has a purple cover.
Okay.
Sorry, the author is escaping me right now.
Okay, so the 5 love languages, and then the 4 tendencies by Gretchen Rubin, which will talk about external expectations, whether you are an obliger who does things for others, whether you're a questioner, you have to have questions answered, upholder, you have things the way you want them, or you're a rebel. Somebody tells you, this is what I want, and you do the opposite, is another one. Is there any other book that you would recommend for the new year or for the entrepreneur? You talked about the Confidence Code.
Yes, the Confidence Code, Essentialism, which is by Greg McKeown, which really helps you figure out what you need to be saying no to or getting off of your to-do list. And I absolutely love that book. It really helped me refocus and narrow down things in the entrepreneurial space. As you know, Tony, there's 100 ways you can go with everything. Sure. But also in, pharmacy and personal life, it really helps simplify and reminds you to reflect on what's important to you. So I would say essentialism is a must.
And I think you had a blog post last year on it, or maybe way early this year.
Yeah, it was probably around January of 2017. There was a whole goal setting series, and essentialism and doing less was one of those.
Okay. All right. Well, Jackie Boyle, thanks so much for being on the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast.
Are you ready for 2018? Check out my website at www.thepharmacygirl.com/shop to check out the planner I designed to get you a jump start on the new year. With weekly and monthly page layouts, goal setting areas, a place to write your to-do list with each weekly layout, and plenty of space for notes each week, this planner will be the only thing you need to get your new year off to the right start.
Support for this episode comes from the audiobook Memorizing Pharmacology, a relaxed approach. With over 9,000 sales in the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia, it's the go-to resource to ease the pharmacology challenge. Available on Audible, iTunes, and Amazon.com, in print, ebook, and audiobook. Thank you for listening to the Pharmacy Leaders Podcast with your host, Tony Guerra. Be sure to share the show with the hashtag #PharmacyLeaders.